We live in an era of noise, notifications, arguments, opinions, reactions. Everyone's talking, but very few are actually saying anything. And in this chaos, something ancient has been forgotten, the profound, almost frightening power of silence. Not the awkward silence you try to fill in small talk. I'm talking about the kind of silence that comes from restraint, from clarity, from philosophical strength. This is what Arthur Schopenhauer understood better than almost anyone. A man deeply misunderstood, often seen as cynical or pessimistic, but in reality, he was a warrior of clarity. And to him, silence was not absence. It was mastery. So today I want to show you why saying nothing, when everyone else is trying to be heard, is the most powerful weapon you can wield. Not just socially, not just spiritually, but existentially. If you've ever walked away from a conversation and thought, I should have said something, or I wish I hadn't reacted like that, then this video is for you. Because Schopenhauer's philosophy teaches us that the urge to speak is often the ego's last defense mechanism. When we feel attacked, we speak to defend the self-image. When we feel overlooked, we speak to validate our worth. When we feel confused, we speak to fill the silence with illusion. But here's the secret: silence is often the truest expression of wisdom, because it refuses to play the game. It refuses to fuel the fire. And in doing so, it reveals the emptiness of those who depend on constant speech to feel significant. What if your silence made people more uncomfortable than your words ever could? What if not reacting was the most devastating move of all?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Schopenhauer believed that most people don't want truth, they want confirmation. And when you withdraw your voice, your energy, your attention, you deny them that confirmation. You deny them the illusion that what they're saying is meaningful simply because it's loud. In doing so, you hold up a mirror, and often that mirror is unbearable. But this isn't just about debates or arguments. It's about life itself. The more we speak, the more we leak. We give away our energy, our focus, our peace. And in return, we get very little that nourishes us. Schopenhauer once said, "The wise have always said the same thing, and the fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite." So why engage? Why waste your breath when silence already contains the answer? You may win the argument, but lose your center. And what good is that? Let me ask you something deep right now. What's the last thing you said that you truly wish you had just kept to yourself? Was it a message you sent in anger? A defense you made out of insecurity? A comment you shared just to be heard, not to be helpful? We've all done it. We've all spoken from reaction, not intention. But the moment you realize the cost of that reaction, how much energy it steals, how much peace it breaks, you begin to understand the brilliance of Schopenhauer's silence. He wasn't silent because he had nothing to say. He was silent because he had too much to say, and he knew the world wasn't ready to hear it. That is power. That is discipline. And that is the path to true philosophical freedom. The silent blade, how not speaking cuts deeper than words ever could. We have been trained to believe that words are our greatest tool. That to be heard is to be seen, and to be silent is to be weak. But what if the opposite is true? What if silence is not the absence of action, but the sharpest form of it? This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy stabs straight through the heart of modern noise. You see, in a world obsessed with visibility, invisibility becomes subversive. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes revolutionary. When someone insults you, and you say nothing, truly nothing, not even in your mind, you don't just walk away. You win. Not in the petty sense of, I'm better than you, but in the deeper, more devastating sense of, you no longer have access to my inner world. That's the silent blade. That's the power. Schopenhauer understood that the more we speak, the more we reveal not only our thoughts but our wounds. Every word is a thread pulled from the tapestry of our inner life. And when we speak from pain, we give others the scissors to cut deeper. This is why silence is so feared, because it denies others entry into your psyche. It creates a boundary so solid, so impenetrable, that it forces others to confront themselves. And let's be honest, most people don't want that. Most people would rather argue than reflect. They would rather provoke you than face their own emptiness. But when you say nothing, you hand them a mirror. And some mirrors slice deeper than swords. You didn't have to wound them. You just refused to validate their illusion. And in that refusal, they unravel. I think of the last time someone tried to bait you into a reaction. Maybe they tried to make you jealous or angry or small. What happened when you said nothing, not in a passive-aggressive way, but from a place of true groundedness? They lost control. Why? Because your silence broke the script. They were expecting a performance. You gave them a void. And the mind hates the void. It wants chaos, conflict, combustion, anything but stillness. Stillness is terrifying for an untrained mind. But for you, stillness is your superpower. Because in stillness, you don't just avoid unnecessary battles. You win the war of attention, the war of ego, the war of energy. And Schopenhauer knew this long before the noise of social media ever existed. He knew the most dangerous person in the room is not the one who speaks the loudest. It's the one who watches and waits. Let me challenge you with a question that might sting. How many of your conversations are truly necessary? How many of your debates are rooted in truth-seeking, and how many are just ego maintenance? What would your life look like if you said 90% less, but meant 100% more? Silence is not about withholding for the sake of mystery. It's about mastery, emotional mastery, intellectual mastery, spiritual mastery. And Schopenhauer believed that the highest form of intelligence is not in expression, but in restraint. The ability to know what you know and not need to prove it. The ability to feel anger and not need to broadcast it. The ability to have clarity and not need applause. That kind of silence, it's not emptiness. It's concentrated power. The soundless fortress, reclaiming your energy through philosophical silence. Imagine your mind as a fortress, ancient, vast, and echoing with thought. Most people leave its gates wide open, letting anyone walk in, speak their chaos, and rearrange the furniture. But Schopenhauer teaches us something different. He tells us to close the gates, not out of fear, but out of respect for ourselves, for truth, for the inner life that deserves protection. Every time you speak, you open the gate. You allow influence, opinion, judgment, and distraction to enter. But when you say nothing, when you sit in the silence while others shout, you reclaim the fortress. You reclaim your energy. And in that stillness, you begin to hear something the noise never lets you hear: yourself. The more you speak, the more you fracture your attention. Schopenhauer wrote that the greatest achievements of the mind are the result of deep solitude. Not just physical solitude, but mental solitude, the kind that can only exist when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop needing to be understood. This is hard. It goes against everything we're trained to do. We're taught to clarify, to justify, to defend. But every defense is a crack in the wall. Every explanation is a surrender of energy. You are not obligated to explain yourself to everyone. You are not required to participate in every conversation. You are allowed to let others misunderstand you and still be free. That's the essence of the soundless fortress. You live within yourself, not above others. Let's go deeper. Silence is not just a social tool. It's a spiritual discipline, because in silence you confront what noise hides. You confront your desires, your fears, your illusions. That's why most people run from silence. They're not afraid of being unheard. They're afraid of hearing what lies beneath the surface. But you're not here to escape. You're here to awaken. Every moment you choose silence over reaction, you build resilience. Every time you sit with discomfort, instead of projecting it, you build depth. And every time you refuse to speak from ego, you become less of the world and more within it. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Silence is not isolation. It is integration. So let me ask you a final question, one that could change your life if you're brave enough to answer it honestly. What part of yourself are you trying to protect by speaking so often? Is it the part that fears being forgotten? The part that wants to be admired? The part that's still trying to prove it exists by being seen? What if that part doesn't need more attention but more peace? What if the healing you seek is not in being heard, but in learning to listen not to others, but to the still presence inside you that already knows who you are? That's where the real power is, not in the words, not in the performance, but in the silence that remains when all illusions fall away. And maybe that's the most Schopenhauerian truth of all, that to master life you must stop needing to explain it. That to be powerful, you must stop trying to appear powerful. That to be wise, you must learn when to say absolutely nothing. Because silence, when it comes from clarity, not fear, is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. It is the soundless fortress, and it is yours to claim.